Past year and some change, we've had some significant events that occur in Washington, D.C., January 6th being one of the most significant events, but also the sniper case that we had here recently. So I want to take time, explain to people who are seated with us today, want to take time out to really kind of talk a little bit more in depth about this case, where we are. We have Detective Branson, who is the lead investigator on this case, who's here to answer questions as we walk through this slide. We have Commander Bedleon, who was on the scene, who's the 2nd District Commander. And we have Director Carolyn Montagna, who runs our Joint Operations Command Center. And she will be, she runs a lot more than just that, but she will be, she was also very instrumental in this. So we have some slides that we're going to talk about. But in addition to that, we've also sent out a number of photographs. And I will say that one of the things that we wanted to do in this space, I don't think we talk often enough about these things, and community members, you know, we kind of just move on to the next thing, and community members don't oftentimes understand like the why behind things, and we're still searching for that answer. But hopefully with some of these visual images that we're sharing, people will really kind of get an inside look of what we were dealing with on this dreadful day here in the District of Columbia. So there you have the apartment building where our sniper was located at 2950 Van Ness, and below that you have the address for the Edmund Burke School, which is right at 4101 Connecticut Avenue. We're going to move into the radio transmission from when this event first kicked off. One of our off-duty officers who was working at the school, Officer Peterson, was the officer who initially called this who initially called this in to dispatch to send additional units to assist.
Radio 5706. 5706, go ahead. 4101 Connecticut Avenue. I believe we have an active shooter here. Different units to respond.
31, 4101 Connecticut. Just got the call on the board. 4101 Connecticut.
So, in that space, when Officer Peterson first calls this active shooter in progress out, Commander Bedleon here, who's the 2nd District Commander, he was one of the first individuals to respond to the scene shortly after the transmission started. And I think it's important to note that Commander Bedleon had just, with his team, with his roll call officers at the 2nd District, had just talked about active shooter scenarios, the importance of making sure that the resources are deployed out in community just prior to this incident happening. So I think that was very timely, obviously very wise on his part, just kind of as a reminder to the officers. But when he arrived on the scene, I called him shortly after he arrived on the scene. Again, I was not in Washington, D.C. when this initially started, but he was going through the process of establishing a command post, getting the federal authorities as well as our local partners, and really just kind of activating all those things simultaneously and making some life, really some life or death determinations at that point. There were people who were shot, and we could have very easily had people go into the hot zone, first responders going into the hot zone, but Commander Bedleon, and he'll talk a little bit about that, made a decision. One of our retired officers who was shot and nearly killed, they picked this officer up and they carried him from the scene where he was shot to the location of a waiting ambulance that was further away down the street. And that's a decision that's made by the commander. You know, some people, you know, could argue that, hey, you know, why did you guys move him? That could have caused more harm. I mean, he made a life or death decision in a very intense situation. And I think that because of that, it saved his life. I had an opportunity to visit with our retired officer. I had an opportunity to visit with him just the other day, he and his family at the hospital. And he is so incredibly grateful and thankful to be alive today in response to all of this stuff that happened. So we're just very, very thankful for him. So 318, Officer Peterson goes across the air with the priority for the active shooter at 4101 Connecticut Avenue. They ended up receiving a total of 33 911 calls were recorded. And just a couple of items, a couple of different items to note where the command post was set up, the 4000 block of Connecticut. We get calls coming in for shots going into buildings and a whole bunch of other things that are happening. At 422, residents inside of the apartment building begin to be evacuated outside. Family reunification center is established, and persons of interest get announced around 7:30. We'll talk a little bit about that as well. 8:36, units attempted to enter Unit 511, which we know is the location. I'm sorry. Oh, I'm sorry. My apologies. At 511, we know that the 511 was the apartment that our officers ultimately end up entering. And as they were entering that location was barricaded. You guys have heard me tell the story about that. The location was barricaded with a refrigerator at the front door. In addition to the barricade of the refrigerator at the front door, there was also a camera that was inside of the hallway, facing down the hallway, that was able to see officers, responding officers, as they were making their way to this location. Now, there are several photos and images, more than what I have in this display, that we have sent out to you guys. So please feel free to use whichever ones you like. The most graphic ones, obviously, we did not include that, but everything that we have, pretty much, we have shared that with the public as well. So there are a significant amount of photos. So this one, for example, these images are images of the school bridge at Edmund Burke School. You have an inside view of the windows that were shot out, and you can also see the sniper's nest, exactly where he was at the time of this shooting. So he had a very clear view of the young people at that school. He had a very clear view of the people as they were traversing across, and a very clear view of everything that was happening just below where his apartment was. Not long after we had the shooting, we started receiving information through different analysts who were checking for information, and also people in community who started to forward information. And not long afterwards, we received this posting here, and we tracked the IP address for this individual. And Mr. Spencer did not try to shield his identity. He did not try to. He didn't try to do anything to disguise who was actually behind this. So as these posts here started popping up, obviously the Metropolitan Police Department, you see that's 3:30 around that time when he started posting, 3:30, 3:36. It was not long after that when we started really kind of tracking this information to really get to confirm who in fact we were dealing with. So his IP address, everything was there, everything. He was identified as the leaseholder. Additional tips started coming in through community, and we certainly appreciate that. You guys have seen the image before of Mr. Spencer. We put that image out to the public as soon as we could. Again, that was a decision point for us. And that decision was made for a couple of different reasons. We had heard from some in community that Mr. Spencer was potentially seen in community after the shooting, and we didn't know whether or not he was still inside of the location or if he was actually out and about in community. So as a result of that, this determination was made to get his image out to the community so that if he were out there, one, we wanted people to report it, but the risk in that was, him being on the other end and knowing what we know at that point. If he's seeing his image on the TV, really kind of knowing that MPD is starting to, and now other federal partners are starting to zero in on his location, exactly where he is. This next image here are some things that were taken from inside of Mr. Spencer's apartment, but in addition to that, shortly before midnight on the 21st, we know that Mr. Spencer took a ride share from Fairfax County, Virginia, to the Van Ness residence, the Van Ness address. Both of these locations very sparsely decorated, not a lot of furniture or anything like that in there, just basic necessities, if you will, inside of the apartment. But this image here to the right is Mr. Spencer coming through. It's a surveillance video of him at about 12:43 a.m. And we believe inside of the suitcase that he has there are at least some of the firearms that Mr. Spencer was in possession of. This next image that I'm going to show you guys is one that has not really been out in the public, and it's from inside of Mr. Spencer's, actually inside of his home. So you can see here that, again, he has a very clear view. Here's the sniper stand that's there, one of the bullets that went through the window there, but just a very clear view of what his target was. And these next images, the image up in the far left he fired a number of shots through a screen there, in addition to the shots that came from the sniper's rifle, but there were a number of shots that were fired through the screen. One of the handguns with the extended magazine there, that's in that middle picture, and then those firearms is just as they were. You look to the top up in the right, you see like it has like a green sheet or something. That's the bed, the sniper's bed that he had. Again, and this was, those are not our desk in there. With those are all things that are, originally just as they were taken as a result of what MPD found. And you look at the bottom pictures, you see a number of shell casings, you see another number of bullets. Those are very similar, obviously, in terms of caliber. What bullets were fired from the sniper's rifle. And again, he had several of these rifles laid out on the table, and they were certainly ready to go. Some additional images for you guys. I'm not exactly sure why the smoke detector was covered up, but the smoke detector had like a painter's covering over top of it, as if they were, as if something was going. We don't know if it was to conceal it because of smoke or something that will be coming from the firearms. That would be my guess. If there's smoke, if there's rounds being fired and you have smoke inside the apartment, it could very well set off the fire alarm. So the smoke detector was covered. Again, another one of the drum magazines that he had. This lower picture down here to the bottom left is actually inside of the bathroom, and as the community knows that we've reported on, that's the location where he actually took his life, inside of this location. That little device that you see right there, we now know is the monitor for the camera, which is the next piece there, the camera that he had in position in the hallway so that he could see officers who were responding. And again, just a demonstration of the firepower that he was in possession of to do what he did. So when I say that this could have been a lot worse than what it was, I mean that in the literal sense. This really could have been a lot worse than what it was. He certainly had the firepower. He certainly had the will. We know that, and the mindset to do what he did on this particular day. These are some nasty rounds up here, and they do a lot of damage. So we wanted to share these things. And the next picture that you see here is just one of the images and measurements of the rounds, so you can see that in comparison to some of the other rounds that we see, the smaller caliber rounds that we oftentimes are seeing on the street, like 9mm and the like. This is much larger round. In addition to that, We served search warrants on his home in D.C. as well as his home in Fairfax County, and we've already reported about the number of firearms that were recovered here in D.C., which were 6 that were fully assembled, and in Virginia, 3 unassembled firearms, but certainly with the capacity for him to assemble those firearms. The firearms were purchased legally in the state of Virginia, but I should add that he was not licensed here in D.C., so technically they were illegal firearms here in our city. We work very closely with our partners in Fairfax County to really work through and get all of the evidence that we could from the location in Fairfax County. In this last slide, before we really turn to questions, just an update on the victim. So we know the 12-year-old female victim. She was actually walking through the elevated bridge. To the pickup location after school when she was struck. And obviously, we're happy that her condition, she is in better physical health, but obviously still dealing with the trauma of this. The 56-year-old male retired police officer, he remains in the hospital. As I said, I went to visit him recently, and he is doing much better and appears to be coming out of the woods, so we're happy about that. The 47-year-old female, in this case, she was sitting in her vehicle outside of the school at the pickup location when she got struck and was treated and released. And then there was the 63-year-old female who had a slight graze wound. She was treated on scene and released. So those are the formal slides, and then I'm getting ready to just really kind of turn it over to the team very briefly for them to make some brief comments. Again, normally this is not something that a space that we've operated in where we talk so openly about cases, but I think it's important, again, for community to really kind of see the depth of this investigation, what we were dealing with, and there's still a lot of things that we don't know yet. For example, his financial means. We know that he racked up a significant amount of debt on credit cards, thousands of dollars worth of debt on credit cards, to purchase things that he purchase. We know what the last thing that he ate before this incident happened. We know those things. But in terms of some other things with respect to him, we are still tracking down that track. We know that he separated from his family at least a year prior to this and really had not really been in contact with anyone. We know that he didn't have, we're not really finding any friends. And so when you say a true loner, this individual, at least for the last year or so and prior to that, really defines a loner in my view. So we'll have a little bit about the investigation, a little bit just about the on-scene stuff, and then Carolyn's role in this, and then we'll open it up to any questions you guys may have. So I'll turn to Josh, and Josh, anything that you want to just kind of talk about in terms of how the investigation is going.
So, again, I'm Joshua Branson. What we've done is we've, as the chief has said, we've gotten all his financial records. We got his credit report. We know what financial institutions he was utilizing. We're waiting on a response from those financial institutions to get more detailed information. We have not found his cell phone, but we do have his phone records, so we're going through all that. We've attempted to speak with the majority of his neighbors. Those who were willing to speak with us didn't know him, and therefore they've never seen him with any friends. They've never known him to have any company as apartments. So right now, on that front, we don't have any friends. So if anyone, in the public eye knows this individual, has had conversations with him, feel free to come forward and speak with us. Any witness information is completely confidential. So all witness information is completely anonymous to the public. I mean, not to us, of course, but the anonymity of witnesses is paramount to the police department and to keep people safe and the free flow of information. We know the cause of death, which is important, him killing himself. We've spoken with his family who have been, they're going through a tough time, as you can imagine, so therefore they're speaking with us. have provided a little bit of information. We've spoken with his school. At this time, he just looked like a young man, didn't have any problems going on, kind of kept to himself like the chief said, and then moved out one day last year, and that's the last thing of any known associates we know of as of right now had any contact with him. Kind of dropped off the grid, if you will. So there's certain things that we're trying to get into at this time that takes time. You know, nothing's overnight, but that's where we're at right now.
Thank you, Josh. And Duncan, I want to turn to the commander on the scene. I was talking to Duncan, several times back and forth while I'm in Boston and he's here on the scene, just to make sure that he's getting the support that he needs. Obviously, the rest of the team was here doing that, but for the district commander, being the person who, this is really resting on your shoulders and your community, and people looking to you for leadership, your troops and your communities and so forth, depending on you. If you just kind of want to talk a little bit, Duncan, about your experience there, that would be good.
Sure. Good afternoon. My name's Duncan Bedley. I'm the commander of the 2nd District. I'd say the two things that come to mind are relationship and readiness. Relationship with our local law enforcement partners, both federal and local. That was key on that day. We had United States Secret Service Uniform Division that were there practically in real time. University of the District of Columbia resources were there to assist us and guide us. And then on the readiness part of it, having discussions with our officers about how to respond to these events were critical. So many of you recall in the media the day prior, Thursday night on April 21st, there was an incident at 4500 Connecticut Avenue where an adult female fell from a building. We implemented certain things on that scene that were pivotal in helping us to be ready for this active shooter incident near the Burke School. And having those discussions and making sure folks were engaged, to me, was a true highlight, now allowing our officers to get there quickly and to respond cohesively.
Thank you, Duncan. And Carolyn, for your role, you were more behind the scenes, kind of doing the things that you do. Carolyn makes magic with a lot of stuff that happens to support us as we're out on the front line, but if you want to just kind of talk a little bit about your role, and then we'll go to questions.
Thanks, Chief. Yes, my name is Carolyn Montagna. I am the director of our Joint Strategic and Tactical Analysis Command Center. One of the components of that is our Command Information Center. So I got the call pretty immediately that we were having an incident occurring in 2D. So we started making sure that the proper resources were, for those folks that were down on the street, ensuring that they had information. What we started also doing is kind of coordinating with our partners, the Joint Terrorism Task Force, some of the local and federal partners from around the area as information was coming in. What was really key for us that day is some of the public posts, basically pushing us social media posts of this individual that I have a team of investigative analysts, they're called criminal research specialists, that really dug into some of those posts, where were they coming from, worked with JTTF to do some additional searches to get more information about this individual. And as they were getting information from the streets, I was on the phone with Detective Branson probably 10 times throughout that day and just pushing information back and forth and ensuring everybody knew what we were seeing and kind of putting the pieces together as they were working their investigation.
Thank you, Carolyn. So one other person, and he could not be here with us today, but Officer Peterson, who was the officer on the scene working outside employment at the school. Just a real hero in my book. He really is. He was the guy, the first guy on the scene, making the assessments and doing the things that needed to be done, really to let everybody else who was coming in to this situation know what was going on. Oftentimes, when you hear you have a shooting or you have victims, officers will rush in to a particular location. And had they rushed in to this particular location, I don't even want to imagine how many police officers or first responders we might be talking about right now had they rushed right in. So that collected, coordinated effort between the supervisors and the managers that were on the scene, the tactical folks that were on the scene, and a community member. A special shout out to a community member, and he knows who he is, but it was a community member who pointed out, I think the shots are coming from that particular location there. And we were able to put snipers in place to really lay eyes on where the location was. And once we were able to lay eyes on that, our Secret Service teams, our MPD SWAT team was able to get really laser focused in on a particular unit. And that really helped us. The timely information, that timely support that we got from community was critical in identifying the location where this person was before we were able to, really have a thorough assessment of, who Mr. Spencer was. A community member was able to point some things out that helped us tremendously. So that being said, I will turn it over to you guys for any questions that you might have. Yes, sir.
Big question I haven't heard spoken about is why. Any idea why you did it and why you chose this location?
That's something that we're still searching for. We know that he went and started, while this was going on, manipulating a Wikipedia page for the school. And I'm not sure why he did that exactly. I suspect that as we exploit some of his device, his computer, and some other activity online, I think we may know a little bit more at that point. It's easy when you have a suspect who leaves behind a manifesto or something like that, and they kind of tell you why they did what they did. But in this particular case, he left his fingerprint behind, he left his name behind, but I'm hopeful that we'll get to that. No one has come forward. His family has not suggested any reason why he did this. And I've talked to some parents up at Edmund Burke School, and when I have to look a parent in the face and try to answer the question for them, like, Chief, is it safe to send my kid back to school? Do we know why? And I wish I could tell them I knew exactly why, but I honestly, I don't know that answer yet. But we're not going to stop until we find out why. And I think that the more we can talk about the story, again, this is Washington, D.C. A lot of times things happen and we just kind of move on with life. But I think it's important to continue to tell this story and talk about it. And hopefully, as we talk about this, if there are people out there who have interacted with him or had communication with him, that someone may come forward and share some information that might help us get to that why. So thank you for the question.
Chief,
Mark?
so a couple of questions.
Sure.
One, do you know, I know you're looking into his finances, a lot of the neighbors have been speculating that he was on a voucher in the AVA, the AVO apartment building from maybe DHS or TVA. Do you know if he was actually paying, if he was on a voucher?
It doesn't appear that he was on a voucher, Mark. It appears that he was paying. We're looking at, in some of the financial stuff that I've seen so far, he had one credit card bill for $10,000, $8,000, $7,000, but how he's paying his rent, that's additional information that we're waiting to come in. And once we have that, that might help give us some insight into some things. It appears that he made his payments online. So again, those things are trackable and traceable, and we'll get to the bottom of that.
And then in one of the photos, it appeared to be cash. Was that?
Yes.
Can you tell us how much that was or what that represented? Or?
I don't remember how much it was, but it was just the cash that he had on hand inside of the apartment. Again, it's when I say sparsely decorated, I mean that bed and those tables are probably the most, along with about 3 items of clothing, I think, that were hung up in the closet. And then that money, right? And where did that, where did the cash come from? As we get into, as Detective Branson mentioned, as we get into really looking at his financial transactions over the course of at least the last year, I think that that's probably going to reveal some things that may help us out a little bit. But I don't have any more than that. And he was not one of these voucher. He was not a voucher recipient.
Was it a significant amount of cash that was laid out? And was it laid out like that, or did you guys?
No, we laid it out like that to really just capture what we had in there. I don't know, and of course, right, we can speculate, right? I don't know if in his mind, like, okay, if I get out of here, I need cash on hand to be able to move around and not make any credit transactions, trackable transactions, if that's kind of his mindset. If you look at kind of like I said, how this guy has been moving and the things that he's doing, I don't know how much cash transactions he's done in the past until I get those records back. And that will kind of help us to see, like, is this an anomaly? Did he go and withdraw X amount of money out, 2 days prior, 3 days prior, where before that he just did everything online? And I don't know enough about that, but, I have some suspicions, and I'm just not there yet on what the actual thing is.
And I'm wondering if you can help, because, we've looked at this, I'm not a ballistics expert, but
Yep.
it appears shooting down from his perch, bullets would not reach the Uptown Theater. And so I'm wondering if you have determined, and from one of those pictures where he shot through a screen, those appear to be upward. I'm just wondering if maybe he shot up in the air and he went over buildings and landed. How did that happen?
So he could have done a number of things. The velocity on these type of rounds, I mean, they can go for several thousands of yards, and that is the tricky part, right? We know what he could see, and we know those things that were within the line of what he could see. So if he was firing, from that perch and shooting up, I don't know if it was a magic bullet or what, but we know that that bullet in the velocity certainly had the capacity to travel all the way down Connecticut Avenue because he was from an elevated position. So, again, aside from just the scene itself, when I say that so many more people could have been injured or killed by this gunman in the reckless behavior that was displayed here, I mean, that is not an understatement, and it's not being dramatic. That is real. And I'm just so thankful that, maybe a building got damaged, but that bullet didn't go into a person.
And I know I asked you this before, but was this a school shooting? I know you said the target appears to be what the target was, but was this a school shooting?
Yeah, Mark, I don't think we can't say I don't think we can say that it was not a school shooting. We had a school where a young person, who was inside now, again, every day we get more and more information, and you look at, there's a video, and if you go back and look at the video that he recorded, that he posted, if you slow that video down and really watch it, you will see that he had his target on that footbridge where the young people were crossing, and as they were starting to run across that footbridge, you will see that his firearm from the scope, it was trained on those young people as they ran across the footbridge. It was about 3 of them, I think, but he's like following along as they start to run when the shots were fired. So, I don't think that we cannot say that at this point that it was not a school shooting. Certainly the school was there, and I think, initially, just like trying to really figure out what was his target. Was he targeting law enforcement? Was he just mad? But, at this point now, where we are, I think the fact that someone got shot in the school, to me, and it happened at a school, I think that really kind of pushes us to that point.
Once the snipers got in place, was there ever any spotting of him? Did he ever, after the initial fusillade, did he ever reappear to the snipers?
No, it doesn't appear that he reappeared. It appears that he retreated into the bathroom, and once he got into the bathroom, he was essentially barricaded in there. He had several weapons in there, to include a long gun in there. My guess is that, at some point, perhaps, thinking about his strategy if law enforcement came in there, what he was prepared to do. Again, he had the camera set up, he had the computer set up, he could monitor the actions of the law enforcement officers initially before we disabled the camera, but I think he was preparing himself. Inside of the bathtub, he had I think it was a pillow and like a blanket or something like that he had inside of the bathtub, which tells me that he was, there's a bed in the other room, but he was probably set to be there for the long haul. Had we not entered into the building, or had we not identified his location, he was prepared to be inside of that location for a while.
And had he appeared to the snipers?
Say it
If he
again.
had appeared to the snipers,
If he had appeared to the
were
snipers,
they ready?
I would have gave the green light in a heartbeat, absolutely.
Chief, after major shootings, we see some kind of change. For example, Las Vegas, there was a change in bump stocks. Is there any discussion right now of what
I haven't heard of a lot of discussion going on about change of anything. You know, when you have a person motivated to do something, right? If one of you guys were motivated to do something in this room right now, you know, like how do you, again, you go through a procedure to get into this building, but if you're motivated to do something, I mean, that is a very difficult thing to try to prevent. You try to put, you know, things in place. So, you know, if there was something different about the, you know, the Las Vegas thing, like you mentioned, they mentioned, you know, bump stocks and doing something differently. Well, that doesn't prevent a guy, if you know how to assemble a weapon, to convert a weapon from semi-automatic to fully automatic. I watched a presentation from the ATF 4 days ago where a person was giving a presentation. And while that person was giving the presentation, he had about a $200 3D printer, and he printed a device in that 40-minute presentation that would allow a semi-automatic weapon to be converted to a fully automatic weapon. In 40 minutes, he did it. 40 minutes, he did that with a 3D printer for $200. So how do you prevent that, right? How do you prevent that? And those are the things, obviously, that are worrisome for community members, but also the thing that really keeps me up at night.
And were there any red flags with the firearm purchases?
Not that I'm aware of, because they were legally purchased firearms. You know, once a person legally purchased a firearm, I mean, you got people who can, you know, walk in off the street, here's my driver's license, here's my whatever, and once they present that documentation that's needed and the checks are done, if they're not showing up on anybody's radar, this guy didn't have a criminal history, he didn't, you know, no issue, no mental health issues that were aware to anyone, he could legally go in and purchase a firearm. So, you know, that wasn't the issue. So again, I mean, in this space, what do you change, right? What's the thing that you change that prevents a guy from doing the unthinkable? I don't think anybody in this room would think to do something like that. But, you know, what do you change to do to prevent the unthinkable?
All right, last question.
Chief,
Mark.
you talked about the importance of coming before the public to explain
Yes.
what you found. Can you explain to us your decision to provide all this information to the Washington Post in advance of providing it to the public and the other news organizations?
So I want everybody to have it, Mark, not just the.
Give them a competitive disadvantage. You give it to them days in advance, including evidence and interviews with people who we're not still getting access to.
So everything that I'm giving to the media, I just want to give it to the public for everybody to see it. And whoever is telling the story, I just think it needs to be told. Again, this is unprecedented in terms of the police department just being very open, very public with all of this stuff. I mean, the suspect is dead. If the FBI or whoever were handling this case, most community members would not hear anything else about it. So if the Post is able to tell the story, and that camera, and that camera, and that camera, and that camera, and that camera is able to tell the story, I just want the story to be told so that people can hear what happened. All of the images that were there, the Post has, you guys, everybody should have all of the images that are there. That's not stuff that we normally do, but I want everybody to have access to it. So tell the story.
Why not at the same time? Why not on a level playing? Do you think it's acceptable to cherry pick one news organization at a time when your boss is seeking their endorsement, at a time when you're trying to get your budget passed, and you give them an exclusive that we still don't have the same access to that you gave them? You think that's acceptable, and that's how NPD is going to disseminate information in the future?
Mark, I want all of you guys to have the information. And that's not to say that any, you know, I'm sure you've never had an exclusive in your career, but
This is different.
I-
This is
Mark,
unprecedented.
Mark.
You keep saying you want everyone to have, I'm sorry, you're not answering my question.
Okay.
Your department gave this information days in advance to one news organization and then hastily called a press conference after we all complained about it to give it to the public. That doesn't seem transparent to me. That doesn't seem like an effort to tell the public. And my direct question to you is, do you think that's acceptable to give this information on such an unprecedented attack on our community to one news organization over another? Is that how NPD will continue in the future?
My direct response to you, Mark, is I want to make this information available to everybody. And I will make this information available to everybody, you, this organization, that organization. That is my intent, to make sure that people have this information, that the community has this information, whether the press conference is called today, tomorrow, whatever the case may be. I want to make sure that everybody has.
You're not answering your
Mark, that's my answer to the question. Mark, hold on a second.
You're avoiding the
Mark,
question. Why would you continue to give huge stories like this? Is not just an exclusive. This is not just one. This is a huge national story that you decided to give to one news organization over every other news organization and the public. And then you come here and act like you want to do a public briefing. You wouldn't be here if we hadn't complained.
thank you, Mark. I appreciate it. That's not, all right.